Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome here at Crypto Hash Review, where we educate and disseminate information about Bitcoin cryptocurrencies from a Muslim perspective. And today we will continue our conversation about unit of account. Unit of account basically means that a currency, for it to be currency, i.e. for it to be something that we can use as a medium of exchange, then it has to be quantified out to units that we can know, understand, interact with, and have some level of consistency. So that being the case, if you look at debt, could debt be a good form of money? And not really, because the debt, I owe you one. What does that mean? How much does that mean? I mean, if I say I owe you, if you built for me a wall, let's say I owe you one, then we can quantify amongst ourselves that I owe you the amount of work that would be necessary for a day's for building a wall for a day. Okay, that's quantifiable amongst us, but it's not a universal thing. Maybe one person's days of work is another person's half a day of work. So it's not exactly the best. So you can almost say that on items and commodities form of money, we're actually having units. That was actually the innovation, to actually systemize a debt, to quantize a debt down to certain units so you can actually exchange. Rather than saying, I owe you a day's worth of work, I say, I'll give you 5 beads. I'll give you 5 mammoth tooth, or I'll give you five pieces of ostrich egg, or I'll give you 5 something that is quantifiable. So it's like a standardization of a debt. That was the big innovation. So in terms of items and commodities, they would probably get, I would give a 3.5 out of 5 for that standardization because they were good, but they weren't necessarily universal. One man's bead is another man's junk, you could say. So in terms of being unit of account, and also it's very susceptible to supply and demand, in the sense that if someone came into our lands with massive supply of these beads that was cheap for them to make but hard for us to make, that would literally destroy our currency, which actually happened more than once. I could mention in West Africa, when they used to use those glass beads. When the Europeans came and they brought these glass beads over, they literally decimated their economy because it was cheap for them to make, but it was rare for them until it was no longer rare. So I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5. But in terms of it being on a short-term level of standardization, then I'll probably maybe make it a 4 out of 5. Which brings us to gold. Gold has been very good, historically speaking. There's been this old saying whereby the price of a sheep at the time of the Messenger of Allah in gold was the same as the price of sheep today. And for the large part of it, that's been consistent. Gold, in terms of its purchasing power, what you could buy with gold, has kind of remained relatively the same for over 1,000 years. So there was hadith, and Mr. Allah, he gave one of the companions a dinar. He said to him to buy a sheep. So he went out and bought 2 sheep and sold one of those sheep for 1 dinar. And then he brought back the Messenger of Allah the sheep he asked for and the money he gave him. And he made dua for him for that great trade. Point was, that sheep, we can see that at some point, someone was willing to pay 1 dinar for a sheep. What is 1 dinar? 4.25 grams of gold. Now, 4.25, multiply that by, I think, 44 pounds, which is what the price of gold is per gram at the moment. And you kind of get 160 pounds, which is roughly the price of a sheep. And if you want to say that there was one trade who really bought 2 sheep for that amount, so you can say the range between maybe 180 to 140 pounds. And that's roughly the same price of a sheep to this day. So I will give gold a 5 out of 5 for being a unit of account, in the sense that it has pretty much maintained its purchasing power over time. Now, the myth, however, is that it's always been the case, which is not true. There's been times when the price of gold, as what you could buy of gold, has gone up or it's gone down. It hasn't been consistently in a straight line throughout the times. Even at the time, the Messenger of Allah, when the companion said, "Oh, Messenger of Allah, the price of things have gone up, so set the prices for us." And then the rest of the hadith. But the point was, they mentioned that the price had gone up so much, they wanted the Messenger of Allah to set the prices. They used gold and silver to buy and sell, which means that there was inflation. At the time of the Messenger of Allah, there was inflation of prices of certain items. So we can see that, yeah, relatively speaking, the ups and downs of gold has pretty much been stable. throughout the ages, which isn't the case for silver, which is also money. Silver to gold ratio was about 7 to 1. Today, silver to gold is about 70 to 1. So the silver price has drastically changed from the time of the Messenger of Allah. Just to give an example, the nisab, the lowest level or lowest limit that you need to have money to pay zakat is about £4,000 now in gold. And silver would have been, it was the same price of gold and silver at the time of the Messenger of Allah, but today, the nisab of silver is now about £300. That's a massive difference between the price of silver and gold. So silver hasn't maintained its stability over a long period of time. Maybe over a short period of time, but not necessarily over a long period of time. But silver is still something that can be used for currency. Moving forward to fiat currency, there's a bit of a myth that fiat currency are stable. Yeah, I mean, if you were to only factor in dollars and pounds and euros, maybe. But if you just go outside of that and look at other countries, look at the Venezuelan peso, I think it is, or you look at the Zimbabwean money that they had when it was hyperinflated. Look at many other countries, even the Lebanese pound. They went through calamities with their currencies falling off of a cliff. So currencies, fiat currencies, it's not the nature of fiat currency to be stable. Yes, we know it to be stable in our countries, like the European countries, or maybe even like some Arab countries, but that's only, number one, because you're maybe living in that country. When we were living in Medina University, when we was receiving what's called the mukafa, the monthly wages in Saudi, we always used to compare that to pound, because obviously our mind's still in England and we're living in Saudi. So some months we would get £500, 500 riyals, and some months we would get less. So on a month-to-month basis, we were literally getting swings of about, you could say, 10%. So, but if you lived in Saudi, you would never know, because the price of things kind of remained the same. So I would say fiat currencies, I'll give it a 3, mainly because historically speaking, all fiat currencies have gone to zero, which is not the case to be said about gold or even commodities, items. They haven't gone to zero, but as for fiat currencies, almost all of them have become worthless. So I would say we have a ticking clock where our current system will eventually go to zero. And there already are discussions at the moment right now due to COVID of replacing the current system with something else. Now we're moving on to Bitcoin. Now, the biggest argument, or the most common argument given against Bitcoin, is that, oh, the price goes up and down and left and right, and what kind of currency is this? And it's true, the price of Bitcoin does change rapidly, but that's to be expected. If Bitcoin, when it first started, had no value to anyone, no one would pay even a penny for a Bitcoin, then how would you possibly get from that to even where we are now, which is at $35,000 or $36,000? How do you get from here to here? You don't just jump from there to there overnight. You have to get there slowly, and as you go up slowly, people will take profits and they'll sell, and so on and so forth. So the journey from nothing to something takes time. But the main issue here about money is not whether or not you can use it as units of account, is whether or not it can store value. So yes, if you want to compare, can I use Bitcoin and have a shop and price everything in Bitcoin? Not really, because I'll have to change the prices pretty much every day. But could I still transact with Bitcoin? Yes, I can. Can I still have my savings in Bitcoin? Yes, I can. And because of that, I would say, in terms of this argument of unit of account, I would give it maybe a 3 out of 5. But in terms of storage of wealth or storage of value, I'll give it a 5 out of 5. Now, maybe I'm biased. I mean, I have the Bitcoin Cup. Of course, I'm biased. But that's something for you to think about. But one last departing point about Bitcoin is that since Bitcoin has started until today, whoever held Bitcoin more than 4 years has never been in loss. And that is an amazing store or mechanism to store your wealth, especially over the long term. I hope you find this video useful. Like and subscribe. If you want to give us a shout, you can find us on our website. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.